The industrial-strength floor cleaner left a sharp scent in the air as Daniel Morgan pushed the mop across the gleaming lobby of Pinnacle Enterprises. 6 days ago, he had been sitting in the penthouse office 52 floors above, making decisions that affected thousands of employees and billions in assets. Today he was wearing faded blue coveralls with a name tag that simply read, Dan, his designer watch replaced by a battered Timex, his tailored suits exchanged for clothing that would never turn heads. "Hey, new guy! Don't forget the corner by the security desk," called out Hector, the head of maintenance and the only person in the building who knew Daniel's true identity. Hector had worked for Pinnacle for 23 years and had been the one to reluctantly agree to Daniel's unusual request to work undercover as a janitor in his own company for 1 week. "The executives never notice us," Hector had warned him. "You'll be invisible." That was precisely what Daniel wanted. At 38, he had built Pinnacle Enterprises from a small tech startup into a corporate powerhouse, but recent employee satisfaction surveys had revealed a troubling disconnect between upper management and rank-and-file workers. When an anonymous employee comment described the executive team as living on another planet, something had resonated uncomfortably with Daniel. Now, as he worked his way methodically across the lobby floor, he was experiencing firsthand just how accurate that assessment had been. Employees streamed past him without a second glance. Some talked loudly on phones about weekend plans while nearly stepping in his freshly mopped areas. Others dropped trash mere feet from the bin he had just emptied. He had become part of the building's infrastructure, present but unseen. The morning rush had subsided when Daniel noticed a young woman hurrying through the lobby looking flustered. She was perhaps in her late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing a simple blouse and skirt that had seen better days. She clutched a worn leather bag in one hand and a child's small backpack decorated with cartoon characters in the other. As she rushed toward the elevator, the child's backpack caught on a decorative plant stand, spilling its contents across Daniel's freshly mopped floor. Colored pencils, small toys, and what appeared to be a child's lunchbox scattered in every direction. "Oh, no, no, no," the woman muttered, dropping to her knees to gather the items. "Not today, of all days." Daniel moved quickly to help, kneeling beside her. "Let me give you a hand," he offered, collecting pencils that had rolled under a nearby bench. She glanced up, surprised by the offer, and Daniel was struck by the warm brown of her eyes, though they were shadowed by evident exhaustion. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft with gratitude. "I'm already late, and today is performance reviews for new hires." "You work here?" Daniel asked, handing her the collected pencils. She nodded, stuffing items back into the backpack. "Accounting department. Today marks 1 week, actually." A rueful smile crossed her face. "Not making a great impression by being late, am I?" "First impressions are overrated," Daniel replied, helping her to her feet. "I'm Dan, by the way, new to the maintenance team." "I'm Lucia Rodriguez," she replied, checking her watch and wincing. "Thank you for your help, Dan. I really have to run." As she hurried toward the elevator, Daniel noticed she had missed a small, well-worn teddy bear that had slid under a chair. He retrieved it, but Lucia had already disappeared into the elevator. Later that morning, as Daniel was emptying trash bins on the accounting floor, he spotted Lucia at her desk in the far corner of the open-plan office. Unlike her colleagues, whose workspaces displayed family photos or personal touches, her desk was spartanly bare, except for a framed picture of a smiling boy about 5 years old. Daniel approached with the recovered teddy bear. "I think someone important got left behind," he said, placing it on her desk. Lucia looked up, recognition dawning in her eyes. "Mr. Beans, oh my goodness, thank you. My son would have been heartbroken." She tucked the bear carefully into a drawer. "Jamie insists on packing him in his backpack every day for good luck, even though Mr. Bean stays with me while he's at kindergarten." "Special bear?" Daniel asked, lingering beside her desk. "Very. His father gave it to him before he—" She paused, then simply said, "before he left." The way she said it told Daniel everything he needed to know. Single mother, raising a child alone. Before he could respond, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Rodriguez, those quarterly reports were due on my desk an hour ago." Lucia stiffened. "I'm sorry, Mr. Winters. I had a situation with my son's daycare this morning. The reports are almost ready." The middle manager, hovering over her desk, frowned. "Almost doesn't cut it here at Pinnacle." We maintain standards. Perhaps you should have considered your childcare arrangements more carefully before accepting this position. Daniel felt a surge of anger at the manager's condescending tone, but maintained his janitor persona, quietly moving away to continue emptying trash bins. From his peripheral vision, he saw Lucia's shoulders slump slightly before she straightened them with determined dignity. "The reports will be on your desk in 15 minutes, Mr. Winters," she said evenly. The manager walked away, and Daniel noticed how several co-workers studiously avoided looking in Lucia's direction, unwilling to show solidarity with the new hire who'd already gotten on Winter's bad side. Throughout the day, as Daniel moved through the building's various departments, he found his thoughts returning to Lucia. During his lunch break, he searched the employee database from a maintenance computer, a breach of protocol that would have horrified his security team, and discovered that Lucia had been hired as a junior accountant at the minimum starting salary, barely enough to support herself, let alone a child, in this expensive city. At precisely 12:30, Daniel was mopping the hallway outside the accounting department when Lucia emerged, carrying a small paper bag. She looked surprised to see him. "We meet again," she said with a small smile. "I was just heading to the break room for lunch." "That makes two of us," Daniel replied, leaning on his mop. "Would you like to join me?" The invitation seemed to surprise her as much as it did him. "It's just, you're the only person who's been nice to me today, and I could use a friendly face." The break room was mercifully empty when they arrived. Lucia opened her paper bag and removed a simple sandwich, an apple, and a small container of yogurt. Daniel unwrapped the protein bar he'd grabbed from the maintenance room vending machine. "That's not much of a lunch," Lucia observed, breaking her sandwich in half and offering a portion to him before he could respond. "Please take it, I insist." Daniel was momentarily speechless. Here was a woman who clearly had very little, yet she was offering to share what she had with him, a supposed janitor she'd just met. When was the last time anyone had made such a genuinely selfless gesture toward him? "Thank you," he said finally, accepting the half sandwich with an odd tightness in his chest. "That's very kind." As they ate, Lucia told him about her 5-year-old son, Jamie, who loved dinosaurs and wanted to be an astronaut. She had moved to the city 2 months ago after the small accounting firm where she'd worked in her hometown had closed down. Finding this job was like winning the lottery, she admitted. But between rent, daycare costs, and paying off medical bills from when Jamie was born, sometimes it feels like I'm drowning. She looked embarrassed suddenly. "I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm telling you all this. We've only just met." "Sometimes it's easier to talk to a stranger," Daniel offered. "No history, no judgment," Lucia nodded, finishing her half of the sandwich. "What about you? Have you worked at Pinnacle long?" "Just started this week," he answered truthfully, "still getting the lay of the land." "Well, from one newbie to another, welcome aboard." She smiled, and Daniel noticed that it transformed her face, momentarily erasing the worry lines around her eyes. "Though I imagine the executives up on the top floors don't treat the maintenance staff any better than they treat junior accountants." "Have you met any of the executives?" Daniel asked carefully. Lucia shook her head. "No, and I don't expect to. Word is, the CEO, Daniel Morgan, rarely even comes down from the executive floor, too busy counting his billions, I suppose." She glanced at her watch. "I should get back. Those reports won't finish themselves, and I can't afford to make any more mistakes." As she gathered her things, Daniel felt an unfamiliar discomfort. He was used to employees discussing him in the abstract, but hearing his own name from Lucia's lips, paired with her assumptions about him, stirred something unexpected. "Lucia," he said as she turned to leave, "if you don't mind my asking, why did you share your lunch with me? You hardly know me." She paused in the doorway, considering the question. "My abuela, my grandmother, always said that generosity isn't measured by how much you give from your abundance, but by what you're willing to share when you have little yourself." Her smile held a hint of melancholy. "Besides, everyone deserves kindness, especially on hard days." After she left, Daniel remained in the break room, the half-eaten sandwich before him, representing something he couldn't quite articulate. In his world of executive boardrooms and investment decisions, interactions were transactional, each party seeking advantage. When was the last time someone had shown him kindness without agenda? As he returned to his maintenance duties, Daniel found himself watching the accounting department from a distance. He saw how Winters criticized Lucia's work in front of others, how she stayed focused despite the humiliation, how she was the last to leave her desk even as others began packing up for the day. By the time evening fell and the offices emptied, Daniel had made a decision. His week as a janitor had been meant to understand the employee experience at Pinnacle, but now he had a more specific mission. He wanted to understand Lucia Rodriguez, this woman who had so little yet gave so freely, who faced each challenge with quiet dignity, and who had unknowingly shared her lunch with the billionaire CEO who could buy the building they stood in without blinking. What Daniel didn't realize as he wheeled his cleaning cart toward the maintenance room at the end of his shift was that his simple experiment was about to become far more complicated than he had anticipated, and that the woman who had shared her sandwich would soon turn his carefully constructed world upside down. Daniel arrived early for his second day as a maintenance worker, timing his entrance to coincide with the morning rush. He positioned himself near the lobby entrance, ostensibly polishing the brass directory but actually watching for Lucia. When she hurried through the revolving doors at 7:52 a.m., he noticed she looked even more tired than the day before, dark circles prominent beneath her eyes. "Morning," he called out as she passed. Lucia paused, recognition flickering across her face. "Oh, Dan, good morning." Her smile was genuine despite her obvious exhaustion. No spills or teddy bear rescues needed today, thankfully. "Everything okay?" he asked, noting how she shifted her weight from one worn heel to another. She hesitated. "Just a rough night. Jamie had nightmares and then the babysitter cancelled this morning. I had to scramble to find a neighbor who could take him to kindergarten." She glanced at her watch. "I should go. Winters made it clear yesterday that my probationary period could end before it officially begins." As she hurried toward the elevator, Daniel felt a surge of anger toward Winters. He'd reviewed the manager's personnel file last night and discovered a pattern of harsh treatment toward female employees, particularly single mothers. 3 complaints had been filed against him in the past year, all quietly resolved by HR, with no consequences for Winters. It was exactly the kind of issue Daniel had hoped to uncover with his undercover experiment, but now it felt personal in a way he hadn't anticipated. At lunchtime, Daniel deliberately timed his cleaning of the accounting department break room to coincide with Lucia's lunch hour. She appeared right on schedule, looking harried as she microwaved what appeared to be leftover pasta. "We meet again," he said, emptying the trash bin. Her expression brightened. Must be fate, or just shared lunch schedules. They fell into easy conversation as they ate. Daniel learned that Lucia had earned her accounting degree while working full-time and caring for Jamie as an infant. Her ex-husband had left when she was 7 months pregnant, overwhelmed by the responsibility of parenthood before it had even begun. "Enough about my troubles," she said, pushing her half-eaten pasta aside. "What about you? What's your story, Dan, the maintenance man?" Daniel had prepared for this question, creating a backstory close enough to the truth to feel authentic. "Business degree that didn't work out the way I planned. Took this job to pay the bills while I figure out my next move." "Failed businessman, huh?" she grinned. "Well, that makes 2 of us starting over." "It's not failing if you learn something," Daniel replied, surprising himself with the sincerity in his voice. Lucia studied him, her head tilted slightly. "You don't talk like most janitors I've met." Daniel tensed, aware he might be slipping out of character. "What do janitors talk like?" "I didn't mean—" She looked mortified. "That came out wrong. I just meant you sounded educated." "No offense taken," he assured her. "But maybe that's the problem with Pinnacle and places like it. We make assumptions about people based on their jobs, their clothes, their positions in the corporate hierarchy." Lucia nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. I shouldn't have said that, especially when I've been on the receiving end of those assumptions myself." She checked her watch and sighed. "Break's over. Back to the number mines." As the week progressed, Daniel found himself increasingly drawn to Lucia. Their lunch meetings became a daily ritual, a bright spot in his unusual work week. He learned about her dreams of someday starting her own small accounting practice, of providing Jamie with opportunities she never had, of finally being free from the crushing debt that kept her awake at night. On Thursday, Daniel was mopping the executive floor, his floor, when his CFO, Robert Keller, emerged from the elevator. Daniel turned away, heart pounding, but not before Robert had seen him. "Excuse me," Robert called, approaching with a puzzled expression. "Do I know you?" Daniel kept his head down. Just started this week, sir, maintenance. Robert studied him for an uncomfortable moment. You look remarkably like... Never mind. Carry on. After Robert disappeared down the hallway, Daniel exhaled slowly. His cover was at risk, but he couldn't bring himself to end the experiment early. Not when he was learning so much, not just about his company, but about himself. That afternoon, as Daniel was cleaning the accounting department restrooms, he overheard a conversation that made his blood boil. Rodriguez is behind again on the Westlake audit, Winters was saying to another manager. I told HR we should have hired someone without... Complications. You mean without a kid? The other manager chuckled. Single mothers are nothing but trouble, Winters replied. Always some emergency, some schedule conflict. We need reliable people, not charity cases. Give her another week, the second voice suggested. If she doesn't shape up, we can let her go before the probationary period ends. No severance required. Daniel gripped the cleaning cart so tightly, his knuckles turned white. He had built Pinnacle with a vision of meritocracy, where hard work and talent were rewarded regardless of background. Yet here were his managers, planning to discard a qualified employee simply because she was a struggling single mother. At their usual lunch meeting, Daniel noticed immediately that something was wrong. Lucia's eyes were red-rimmed, and she kept checking her phone anxiously. Jamie's sick, she explained before he could ask. The school nurse called. He has a fever, but I can't leave to get him because I have a meeting with Winters at 3 to review my first week performance. She pressed her fingers to her temples. I've called everyone I know, but my neighbor's at work, and the babysitter has classes all afternoon. Daniel saw an opportunity. I get off at 2 today. I could pick him up and stay with him until you're done. Lucia stared at him in disbelief. You do that? You barely know us. I'm good with kids, Daniel said, which was true enough. His sister's children adored their Uncle Danny. And you helped me when I was new here. Let me return the favor. Lucia hesitated, clearly torn between necessity and the natural caution of a mother. I don't know. Call the school, Daniel suggested. Tell them I'm authorized to pick him up. You can show me a picture so they know I'm getting the right kid, and I'll text you updates every 15 minutes. After a moment's consideration, Lucia made a decision born of desperation. Okay, thank you, Dan. You have no idea what this means to me. At precisely 2:15 p.m., Daniel found himself signing in at Bright Horizons Elementary School, feeling strangely nervous. The school nurse led him to a small cot where Jamie Rodriguez lay curled up with the same teddy bear Daniel had rescued days earlier. Hey, buddy, Daniel said gently. I'm Dan, your mom's friend. She asked me to take you home because she has an important meeting. Jamie regarded him with suspicious eyes that mirrored his mother's. Where's my mum? She'll be home right after her meeting. Until then, you're stuck with me. Daniel smiled. Your mom says you like dinosaurs, is that true? Jamie nodded cautiously. Well, I happen to know a lot about dinosaurs. In fact, I have a whole book of them at my apartment. This was a lie. Daniel lived in a penthouse that occupied the top 3 floors of a luxury building downtown. How about we stop and get one on the way to your place? The boy's interest was piqued. A real dinosaur book? The realest, Daniel promised. After a stop at a bookstore where Daniel purchased not 1 but 3 dinosaur books, along with a stuffed triceratops that Jamie eyed longingly, they arrived at Lucia's apartment building. It was in a neighborhood Daniel rarely visited, the kind of place where security systems consisted of multiple deadbolts and windows were barred against intruders. Lucia's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a walk-up with unreliable heating, judging by the space heater in the living room. The apartment was small but immaculately clean, with furniture that had seen better days but was carefully maintained. What struck Daniel most were the educational posters covering the walls, the bookshelf filled with children's books, and the small desk clearly set up for Jamie's homework. For the next few hours, Daniel tended to the sick child, giving him the children's fever reducer Lucia had instructed, keeping him hydrated, and reading from the new dinosaur books until Jamie fell asleep on the worn couch, clutching both Mr. Bean's and his new triceratops. Daniel used the quiet time to look around the apartment more carefully. Bills were stacked neatly on a small kitchen table, many marked past due or final notice. A calendar on the refrigerator was filled with carefully noted appointments, work schedules, and payment due dates. A corkboard held Jamie's artwork and a single photograph of Lucia in a graduation cap and gown, holding a much younger Jamie, while an older woman, presumably her grandmother, beamed beside them. It was a home built on love and sacrifice, and it made Daniel's luxury penthouse seem sterile and empty by comparison. When Lucia burst through the door at 5:45 p.m., she looked both exhausted and frantic. "I'm so sorry. The meeting ran long, and then the subway was delayed, and..." She stopped when she saw Jamie sleeping peacefully. "How is he?" "Fever's down," Daniel reported. "He ate some soup, drank plenty of water, and we've now named every dinosaur that ever existed." Lucia's shoulders sagged with relief. "I can't thank you enough, Dan. You're a lifesaver." She reached for her purse. "Please let me pay you for your time." Daniel stepped back, hands raised. "Absolutely not. Friends help friends. Are we?" Lucia asked softly. "Friends, I mean?" "I'd like to think so," Daniel replied, suddenly aware of how close they were standing in the small entryway. "Then as my friend, would you like to stay for dinner? It's just spaghetti, but it's the least I can do." Daniel knew he should decline. His charade as Dan the janitor was meant to be temporary, a fact-finding mission that was already yielding more information than he'd anticipated. Getting further involved in Lucia's life would only complicate the inevitable moment when she discovered his true identity. Yet he found himself saying, "I'd love to," because the alternative, returning to his empty penthouse with its pristine furnishings and spectacular views, suddenly seemed unbearable. Over a simple dinner of spaghetti and jarred sauce, with Jamie now awake and chattering about dinosaurs between bites, Daniel experienced something he hadn't felt in years, the warmth of belonging. Not as the CEO whose presence commanded immediate attention, but as just Dan, a friend sharing a meal. As he helped Lucia wash the dishes afterward, their hands occasionally brushing in the soapy water, Daniel realized with alarming clarity that he was developing feelings for her, feelings that were both inappropriate and complicated by his deception. "You're good with him," Lucia observed as they watched Jamie arranging his dinosaur toys in some complex pattern only he understood. "Do you have kids?" "No," Daniel replied honestly. "Never found the right person. Or maybe never made the time to look properly." "Time is a luxury when you're just trying to survive," Lucia said with a rueful smile. "Dating as a single mom isn't exactly easy." "I can imagine," Daniel said, though in truth he couldn't. His own dating life consisted of carefully arranged introductions to women from similar social circles, heiresses, executives, the occasional celebrity, relationships that fizzled under the weight of busy schedules and prenuptial discussions. As Daniel prepared to leave, Lucia walked him to the door. "About my job," she said hesitantly. "The meeting today. It didn't go well. Winters says I'm not meeting expectations. He's giving me one more week to prove my value, whatever that means." Daniel felt a surge of protective anger. "That's not fair. You're one of the hardest workers in that department." "Life isn't fair," Lucia replied with a shrug that broke his heart. "But I'll figure something out. I always do." On impulse, Daniel reached out and squeezed her hand. "It'll be okay, Lucia, I promise." It was a promise he had no right to make as Dan the janitor, but one he was determined to keep as Daniel Morgan, CEO. What he didn't anticipate was how quickly his two worlds would collide, or the hurt his deception would cause to the woman who had, against all odds, begun to matter more than he could have imagined. Friday morning dawned with an unexpected complication, a major acquisition deal that required the CEO's immediate attention. Daniel's phone vibrated incessantly as he donned his maintenance uniform for what was supposed to be his final day undercover. "I need you back in the office today," Robert insisted during their third call. "The Jensen merger is falling apart, and the board is asking questions. Your absence isn't just conspicuous anymore. It's becoming suspicious." "I'll handle it remotely," Daniel countered, unwilling to abandon his janitor role prematurely. "Send me the documents." "This requires your physical presence, Daniel. Whatever experiment you're conducting needs to end. Now." Reluctantly, Daniel agreed to a compromise. He would work as Dan until noon, then change and appear in the executive suite as himself for afternoon meetings. It would mean missing his lunch with Lucia, but he would return to the maintenance role on Monday to properly conclude his undercover mission. As Daniel pushed his cleaning cart through the accounting department that morning, he noticed Lucia hunched over her desk, her expression strained as Winters loomed over her, pointing aggressively at her computer screen. "Completely unacceptable," Winters was saying, his voice carrying across the open floor plan. "If you can't handle basic reconciliations, perhaps you should reconsider your career choice." Lucia's face flushed with humiliation as colleagues pretended not to notice her public dressing down. "I'll fix it right away, Mr. Winters." "See that you do," Winters replied coldly. "And I expect you to stay until it's done properly, even if that means working late. Your personal circumstances are not this company's concern." As Winters walked away, Daniel fought the urge to confront him then and there. Instead, he maneuvered his cart closer to Lucia's desk, pretending to empty nearby trash bins. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly. Lucia glanced up, embarrassment evident in her eyes. "Just another wonderful day in paradise," she said with forced lightness. "I made a mistake on the Henderson account, and apparently that makes me unworthy of basic human dignity." "Winters is a bully," Daniel said flatly. "A bully with the power to fire me," Lucia reminded him. "I can't afford to lose this job, Dan." Daniel wanted to tell her that she wouldn't lose it, that he would personally ensure Winters faced consequences for his behavior, but such assurances would reveal too much. Instead, he said, "I'm sorry I can't make lunch today. Something came up." "That's okay," she replied, already turning back to her computer. "I should work through lunch anyway. Maybe I can salvage my reputation before Winters decides I'm a lost cause." Daniel hesitated, then reached into his pocket and placed a folded note on her desk. "Read this later," he said, before moving on with his cart. In the note, he'd written his personal cell number, not the janitor's number he'd been using for their previous communications, along with, "Dinner tomorrow night? I know a great place that serves dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets for special 5-year-old guests. No pressure, just friends." It was impulsive and complicated, given his imminent return to his real identity, but Daniel couldn't bear the thought of simply disappearing from Lucia and Jamie's lives. He would have to find a way to transition from Dan the janitor to the real Daniel Morgan without losing the genuine connection they'd formed. At 11:45, Daniel slipped into the executive bathroom on the top floor where he'd stored a suit, his usual watch, and other accessories in a locked cabinet. The transformation was striking. Within minutes, Dan had vanished, replaced by Daniel Morgan, CEO, in his bespoke suit and Italian leather shoes. As he rode the private elevator to the executive floor, Daniel felt a strange sense of dislocation. After just a week of living as someone else, his real life suddenly felt like the costume. "Thank God," Robert exclaimed when Daniel strode into the conference room where the executive team was gathered. "The prodigal CEO returns." "I was never gone, Robert," Daniel replied smoothly, taking his place at the head of the table, "just working on a special project. Now bring me up to speed on Jensen." For the next 3 hours, Daniel was fully immersed in CEO mode, negotiating terms, reviewing contracts, making million-dollar decisions with practiced ease. Yet he found his thoughts repeatedly drifting to Lucia, wondering if she'd found his note, if she would accept his dinner invitation, if she was still enduring Winters' abuse. At 4:30 p.m., as the meeting was winding down, Daniel's assistant knocked and entered with an urgent expression. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Morgan, but there's a situation in accounting that requires immediate attention." Daniel's pulse quickened. "What kind of situation?" HR called. "Apparently there's been an incident between Mr. Winters and a new employee. It's getting heated." Daniel was on his feet before she finished speaking. "Which employee?" "A Ms. Rodriguez, I believe. She just started last week." Daniel moved with purpose toward the elevator, his executive team exchanging confused glances behind him. As the doors closed, Robert slipped in beside him. "Daniel, what's going on? Since when do you personally handle HR disputes?" "Since now," Daniel replied tersely as the elevator descended to the accounting floor. They could hear the commotion before the doors opened. Winters' raised voice carrying through the otherwise quiet office where most employees had already left for the weekend. "Completely incompetent. I've given you every opportunity to prove yourself, and you've failed at every turn. Clear out your desk. You're done." Daniel rounded the corner to find Winters standing over Lucia, who was seated at her desk, white-faced but composed, an HR representative hovering uncertainly nearby. "Mr. Winters," Lucia was saying with remarkable calm. "I've corrected the reconciliation issue. If you'll just review it—" "It's too late for that," Winters snapped. "I've made my decision. Your probationary period is terminated effective immediately." "What's going on here?" Daniel demanded, his CEO voice a stark contrast to the friendly tones of Dan the janitor. The room froze. Winters turned, his face shifting from anger to sycophantic deference in an instant. "Mr. Morgan." "Sir, I didn't expect— That is, I'm handling a personnel matter. Nothing for you to concern yourself with." Lucia stared at Daniel, confusion evident in her expression as she took in his transformation from maintenance worker to corporate executive. "I'd say firing an employee without proper cause is very much my concern, Mr. Winters," Daniel replied coolly, "especially when it's done publicly, with the apparent intent to humiliate." Winters blanched. "Sir, you don't understand. This employee has been consistently underperforming. Her personal issues interfere with her work and—" "Her personal issues?" Daniel interrupted. "How you mean the fact that she's a single mother working hard to support her child while dealing with colleagues who seem determined to see her fail?" Lucia stood slowly, her eyes never leaving Daniel's face. "Dan," she said quietly, the single syllable carrying a world of questions. Winters looked between them in confusion. "You know each other?" "Ms. Rodriguez and I have had several illuminating conversations this week," Daniel confirmed, maintaining his professional demeanor despite the tightness in his chest. "In fact, I've been observing the entire accounting department as part of my undercover assessment of company culture." The color drained from Winter's face. "Undercover? You mean you were—" "The new janitor, yes," Daniel finished for him. "A position that gave me unique insights into how this company actually functions when executives aren't watching, or so you thought." Turning to the HR representative, Daniel continued, "I want a complete review of Mr. Winters' management history, including all complaints filed against him in the last 3 years. And Ms. Rodriguez will not be terminated today or any day based on the fabricated performance issues Mr. Winters has invented." "Yes, Mr. Morgan," the HR representative stammered. "Right away." Winters began to sputter excuses, but Daniel cut him off. "We'll discuss your future with the company on Monday, Mr. Winters. For now, you're dismissed." As Winters slunk away, the office fell into stunned silence. Lucia remained standing by her desk, her expression unreadable, as she processed the revelation that the friendly janitor she'd shared lunches with was actually the billionaire CEO of Pinnacle Enterprises. "Ms. Rodriguez, may I speak with you privately?" Daniel asked, gesturing toward a nearby conference room. Without a word, Lucia gathered her purse and followed him, her back straight, her chin lifted with dignity, despite the shock evident in her eyes. As Daniel closed the conference room door behind them, he was acutely aware of Robert and the HR representative watching through the glass walls, along with the remaining accounting staff who had witnessed the dramatic confrontation. For a long moment, Lucia simply stared at him, taking in his expensive suit, his confident posture, all the external trappings of wealth and power that had been hidden beneath the janitor's uniform. "So," she finally said, her voice carefully controlled, "everything was a lie." "Not everything," Daniel replied earnestly. "My name is Daniel, not Dan. And yes, I'm the CEO, not a janitor, but nothing else was a lie, Lucia. Not our conversations, not my respect for you, not my offer to help with Jamie. Why?" she asked simply. "Why the deception? Was I some kind of social experiment? A way to feel good about yourself by helping the struggling single mom?" The hurt in her voice cut deep. "It wasn't about you specifically," Daniel tried to explain. "I wanted to understand what was happening in my company at ground level. Employee surveys showed a disconnect between management and staff, so I decided to experience life at Pinnacle from a different perspective. And I just happened to be convenient? The perfect sob story?" Lucia's voice hardened. "Did you laugh about it later? Poor Lucia sharing her meager lunch with a billionaire who could buy the building?" "Never," Daniel said firmly. "If anything, your kindness humbled me. You offered friendship and generosity without agenda, when you had every reason to focus only on your own survival." Lucia crossed her arms, unconvinced. "What about yesterday? With Jamie? Was that part of your research too?" That was me helping a friend, Daniel insisted. Nothing more, nothing less. A friend who didn't even tell me his real name, Lucia countered. Do you know how this makes me feel? Knowing that while I was sharing my struggles, my fears, my life with you, you were hiding behind a fake identity? That my son welcomed you into our home under false pretenses? Daniel had no defense against the accusation because she was right. What had begun as a well-intentioned corporate experiment had become personal, and in the process, he had betrayed the trust of someone who had shown him nothing but kindness. I'm sorry, he said simply. I never meant to hurt you. When we met, you were just another employee, part of my broader assessment. But then I got to know you and... He hesitated, unsure how to express the shift in his feelings without making the situation more complicated. You became important to me, as a person, not as a case study. Lucia's expression remained guarded, but something in her eyes softened slightly. So what happens now? You go back to your executive suite and I continue struggling in accounting. We pretend none of this happened. That depends on you, Daniel replied honestly. Your job is secure. That's non-negotiable. Winters will be dealt with, but beyond that, he took a deep breath. The dinner invitation in my note still stands, as Daniel Morgan, not Dan the janitor. Lucia looked away, conflicting emotions playing across her face. I don't know, Daniel. This is a lot to process. You're my boss. My boss's boss's boss, actually. There are power dynamics here that can't be ignored. You're right, Daniel acknowledged. It's complicated. But I meant what I said before. I value our friendship, and I'd like the chance to get to know you and Jamie as myself, not as a character I was playing. Before Lucia could respond, Daniel's phone buzzed with an urgent message. The Jensen representatives had arrived early for their scheduled call and were waiting in his office. The real world, his world, was intruding once again. You have to go, Lucia observed, noting his expression. Back to being the CEO. Yes, Daniel admitted reluctantly. But this conversation isn't over, Lucia. Please, think about what I've said. As he turned to leave, Lucia called after him. Why did you help me with Winters? Was that just because we'd met, or would you have done the same for any employee? Daniel paused at the door. I'd like to think I would have intervened regardless. But the truth is, knowing you, seeing your work ethic, your character, your kindness, despite your challenges, made it impossible for me to stand by and do nothing. He met her gaze directly. You showed me what real dignity looks like, Lucia. That's not something I'll forget. With that, he left her standing in the conference room, knowing that the carefully constructed walls between their worlds had permanently crumbled and uncertain whether the connection they'd formed could survive the truth. As Daniel rode the elevator back to the executive floor, Robert studied him with newfound understanding. So that's what this has been about, he said thoughtfully. Not just company culture, but that specific employee. She must be quite remarkable to have caught your attention this way. She is, Daniel replied simply, but I may have ruined any chance of showing her that. What Daniel didn't realize as he returned to his CEO duties was that Lucia was still in the conference room, reading his dinner invitation again with tears in her eyes, torn between the hurt of his deception and the undeniable connection that had formed between them. A connection that transcended job titles and tax brackets in a way neither of them had anticipated. Daniel spent the weekend in turmoil, drafting and deleting countless messages to Lucia. By Monday, with no response to his dinner invitation, he arrived at Pinnacle dressed in a less intimidating suit than usual. Ms. Rodriguez requested a department transfer this morning, his assistant informed him. She's moving to financial analysis today. Daniel felt a pang of disappointment. Lucia was distancing herself, understandably so. He had resolved the Winters situation with a transfer and mandatory leadership training, believing in second chances when possible. At lunchtime, Daniel spotted Lucia sitting alone in the courtyard below. On impulse, he texted, "Look up." When their eyes met through the glass, neither looked away. After a moment, Lucia raised her hand in a small wave. Daniel mirrored the gesture, his heart racing unexpectedly. Her reply came quickly. "We need to talk, really talk, no more pretending." They agreed to meet at Franklin Park Playground that evening, after Jamie's soccer practice. At 7:15, Daniel arrived in jeans and a casual sweater. Lucia sat watching Jamie play with other children, her expression guarded but not hostile. "He asked about you this weekend," she said, as Daniel sat beside her. Wanted to know when Mr. Dan was coming back to read more dinosaur books. I'm sorry I lied to him, to both of you, Daniel said sincerely. Why did you do it? The whole janitor charade, was it really just about corporate culture? It started that way, Daniel admitted. I wanted to understand the employee dissatisfaction firsthand, but then I saw you, working twice as hard as anyone while being treated half as well. Lucia looked away. Do you know what it felt like? Learning that the one person I thought understood my struggles was actually the billionaire CEO. The man you got to know last week, he is me, Daniel insisted. The real me, without the trappings of wealth and position. Sometimes I think he's the most authentic version of myself I've shown anyone in years. How am I supposed to believe that? Lucia challenged. And even if it's true, what could possibly come of this? We're from different worlds, different circumstances, not different worlds. Daniel corrected gently. When I was in your apartment, I felt something I haven't felt in my penthouse with all its luxury. I felt at home. Lucia's expression softened slightly. You can't just say things like that. Why not? It's the truth. Because it complicates everything, she replied. You're still my boss. People will talk. I don't want to be seen as the woman who slept her way to security. Your transfer was based on merit, Daniel assured her. The only string I pulled was ensuring Winters couldn't block it. I respect your independence too much to undermine it. Before she could respond, Jamie came running over, breathless with excitement. Mr. Dan? You came back. He flung himself at Daniel, who caught him in a surprised embrace. Did you bring more dinosaur books? Jamie asked eagerly. Daniel laughed. Not today, buddy, but I could next time if your mom says it's okay. Jamie pleaded with Lucia, who couldn't suppress a smile. We'll see, mijo. Now go play while I finish talking with Mr. Daniel. Once Jamie returned to his friends, Lucia sighed. He likes you. That complicates things even more. Or simplifies them, Daniel suggested. Kids are excellent judges of character. And how exactly would this work? Lucia asked, her tone softening. Us? Transparent but private, Daniel replied. We disclose to HR as required, but keep our personal lives separate from work. You continue your career based solely on your merits. Lucia watched Jamie playing in the fading light. When I brought you half my sandwich that first day, I never imagined where it would lead. Neither did I, Daniel admitted, but I'm grateful it led here. She turned to him. I'm still angry about the deception and concerned about the complications. But, she continued slowly, I also haven't been able to stop thinking about you, about how easy it was to talk to you, how you looked at me like I mattered. Hope blossomed in Daniel's chest. You matter enormously, Lucia. That dinner invitation, does it still stand? Absolutely, Daniel replied, without hesitation. For both of you. I think I'd like to try, Lucia said carefully. Slowly, one step at a time. Starting with dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets? Daniel asked with a smile. Starting with dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets, she agreed, her genuine smile the first since his revelation. 3 months later, the Pinnacle holiday party was in full swing. Daniel had implemented significant changes since his week as a janitor, improved benefits, expanded parental leave, a mentorship program for staff from disadvantaged backgrounds, and an overhauled management evaluation system. He stood watching the entrance until Lucia appeared in an elegant emerald dress, holding Jamie's hand as they navigated the unfamiliar executive floor. The boy looked around in wide-eyed excitement. You came, Daniel said, moving through the crowd to greet them. We came, Lucia corrected with a smile. Someone was very excited to see the famous dinosaur boss floor. Daniel crouched to Jamie's level. What do you think, buddy? Is it as cool as you imagined? It's okay, Jamie replied seriously, but our apartment is more fun since you put up the dinosaur wallpaper in my room. Daniel laughed, rising to meet Lucia's gaze. The past 3 months had been a careful dance of building trust through museum visits, park outings, and quiet conversations. I have something for you, Daniel said, handing her a small envelope. An early Christmas gift. Lucia opened it and gasped. The deed to our building? Daniel... It's now owned by a non-profit housing corporation that guarantees affordable rent for all tenants, he explained. Not a gift to you, a gift inspired by you, by what you've taught me about what really matters. As Jamie darted off toward the dessert table, Lucia turned to Daniel with emotion in her eyes. "So much has changed," she marveled. "Sometimes I still can't believe I'm dating my former boss. We're really doing this, aren't we? Making this unlikely relationship work despite everything." "We are," Daniel agreed, taking her hand. "One step at a time." "The strangest part is how natural it feels," Lucia observed, "whether you're Dan the janitor or Daniel the CEO. That's because underneath both those labels, I'm just Daniel," he said softly. "The man who fell in love with a woman kind enough to share her lunch with a stranger." Lucia's eyes widened at his first mention of love. "Daniel, too soon?" he asked, suddenly uncertain. She shook her head, stepping closer. "No, not too soon." As they stood together overlooking the city lights, Jamie returned to form their small family circle. Different circumstances had brought them together, but their connection transcended all external factors, proving that sometimes the heart recognizes what truly matters long before the mind can make sense of it.